Hello, my name is Anne Russell. I'm going through the process of reading my book, Alcohol and Pregnancy, My Responsible Disturbance, from cover to cover. I understand that paying $29.95 for a book that's definitely not going to cheer you up is and can be expensive for people, so I just wanted to make this available for people if they didn't have the resources to buy it. I never wrote this book to become a millionaire. It was never going to happen. I wrote it because it was what I wanted to hear when I first found out about FASD. I wanted to read or listen to or something how other people managed their lives after they found out. Anyway, so this was chapter 6 and it was called The Joys of Alcohol. When my dad was awake, I'd shave him if he hadn't already been shaved, or feed him his afternoon tea. When he was asleep, I sat near his bed, holding his hand, but not really taking anything in. I did fantasize about ending his life. He wasn't able to move, speak, or make himself understood in any way. His life must have been absolute agony for him. I fantasized about putting a pillow over his face, but yeah, obviously that never happened. Although I had the courage to do this thing, it became a compulsion to visit him at a time when I knew he would be asleep, to give myself just another chance to act on my fantasy if I ever got that brave. I could not help but compare the thin, twisted skeleton of a man in the bed before me to the gentle but broken man I knew prior to the stroke. It physically hurt me each time I entered his room, so I really was relieved when he died. After his death, my mother and I went on a tour around Australia. She treated me very badly and was openly challenged by some of the other passengers about how she behaved toward me. I have to say they were very brave. She was quite intimidating. On returning home, I was lost. I needed something to look forward to, so I decided to go overseas. I already had a full-time job, so I determined to save up to go to the United Kingdom and Europe. I found a part-time job in a cafe 5 days a week, which was after my full-time job, and then another similar job on the weekends. It was only really when I interacted with customers at the cafe that I found there was a great deal I didn't know about life. It seemed I was looking in on the world in which other people lived. I was ignorant of what was normal and what people expected of me. I wasn't aware of fashions and wore mostly jeans, t-shirts and jumpers. I rarely wore anything feminine, and I've lost my pace. And while I thought I had more than a passing knowledge of sociology and human behaviour, I didn't know how to behave in social situations. I couldn't talk to people without becoming quite anxious, and so anxious and socially awkward that I knew other people could see. It was embarrassing. Current affairs were of interest to me, but I couldn't engage successfully with others, even about newsworthy events. Those people who lived through the 70s will know what I'm talking about when I say I remember the Poseidon shares and Minamata. I remember when Elvis visited the president. I cried when John Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy were assassinated. And I remember the beginning of gay rights movement. Even then, I couldn't understand the big deal about gay rights. In my mind, I knew that being gay was not a choice. Who would choose to be ostracised and demeaned and put in prison for loving someone? I also remember the photos of that little girl, naked, screaming in terror, running down the road after napalm had stripped her clothing. I had deep and fervent convictions on the war in Vietnam, apartheid, and a spirituality I gained not from my parents' religion and beliefs, but from reading books on everything, from Buddhism to black magic. I was well read and a passionate and capable student, but I could not communicate other than in my own mind. More often than not, I felt isolated, fragile, and dim-witted, unless I was drinking. Then I became human, and instead of looking in on the world, I was part of it. I came to believe that more than anything else in my life, I needed to be part of the world, and the only thing that could make this happen was alcohol. I had no idea this pastime might develop into such a destructive pursuit, and I had no idea that it's a carcinogen, a Class A carcinogen. This pastime transformed me from a serious introvert into an amusing, witty extrovert who felt the first stirrings of belonging. Every drunk thinks they're amusing and witty, but I think I was. Late in my 17th year, after saving up for 12 months, I flew to London. Unfortunately, my mother also chose that time to visit the United Kingdom and was enraged when I refused to accompany her to visit her rallies. No matter where I went, she followed. I travelled around England, Wales, Scotland, Cornwall, Devon, Channel Islands, Isle of Skye, and then I joined a tour through Russia. Vodka and brandy were freely available in the USSR. I hadn't realised that vodka came in many flavours. Excessive drinking in Russia was the norm rather than the exception, so I didn't stand out at all. Our last night in Moscow proved quite memorable, though, in that most memorable of cities. We were to eat at a below-ground restaurant and then move on to a local bar for after-dinner drinks. As we were being seated in the restaurant, I glanced around at other patrons. Were they Russians or tourists like us? Was this restaurant specifically for people from out of town, or was it a local haunt? I actually noticed a man in thick overcoat walking down the stairs from street level. I was seated half facing the stage and half facing the stairs. I assumed he was going to join the group to the right of me. I glanced away for a second, but my gaze snapped back when I caught sight of his overcoat. Or when I thought about the fact that he was still wearing his overcoat. It was strange that he was still wearing it inside the restaurant, when it was conventional to leave the coat or all coats in the cloakroom. His gait wasn't rushed, yet he clearly knew where he was going. I didn't think any other member of our group had seen him because they were all looking at the stage, but I was fascinated without being able to say why. I followed his progress out of curiosity. He was perhaps 3 metres from our table when he withdrew his hand from his coat pocket, and with it a large knife. It was the sort of knife Crocodile Dundee would have been proud of. He moved closer and my heart delivered a few rapid beats, thinking he was coming to our table. The closer he came, the clearer it was that he was focused on the group behind me. I didn't even get a chance to yell before the restaurant erupted. Mouth open, I'd watched him forcefully plunge the knife into the back of one of the patrons. Without waiting for the inevitable chaos, he turned and ran up the stairs seconds before his victim hit the floor. I shrank back into my chair as he ran past. People at that table started screaming, which alerted the rest of the restaurant that something had happened. We left our table quickly, walked up the stairs to the street. When we reached the footpath, we could see more blood pooled outside the entrance to the club. It told us that the cloakroom attendant had also been killed or wounded by this man. Through our great good fortune, our group was not picked up by the police as witnesses. While it may have been because we left immediately afterwards, I never doubted that if they had wanted to talk to us, they would have found us. One thing I may talk about this later, but I don't think so, but this was during the Cold War in the early 70s. Each level of the hotel that we were staying at had one room, and one room right at the end the door was always closed. But one day when I was going past it, I looked in and I saw banks and banks of computer screens, monitors, and one person watching that screen. So these ladies all had babushkas on, those things that you put on your head, and I guess that every room was monitored 24/7. So they would have known where we were there was no question about it. But it was pretty weird for that time. Okay, well, thank you very much. I'll speak to you next week, and have a great week. Thank you.